So, something that is of a huge concern to me, and not only because it's happening both here and there, but also because I care about the keeping intact of heritages and cultural identities, the mass migration in Europe right now, and the crisis we are seeing with rises in rioting, rises in attacks on women, um,
Mm.
just social systems bursting at the seams from being stressed, a complete negligence by law enforcement to really do anything about it, and not negligence, but endorsement by the political class. I want to hear your perspective on that and what you think the solution there is.
Oh, there's a lot there. Yes, mass migration is a massive problem in the West. I was always against this idea of some kind of great replacement theory, or of it being a conspiracy that was planned. But actually, the more it happens, the more I think that something is going on here. Birth rates are dropping. Whether it's Americans, Brits, Germans, doesn't matter. In the West, look at any country, birth rates are dropping. People are not having children. And governments are panicking and flapping and thinking they have to fix that situation in order to keep the GDP up because all these people care about is GDP. And as a result, they're opening the gates and saying, borders don't mean anything anymore practically. Whether they say that publicly is a different thing altogether, but practically they're opening borders. And what we're seeing is a flood of people that do not share our values and do not share our culture or our heritage. And all along they've been saying, well, if you question any of that, you're racist and you're a xenophobe and you're a bad person. Therefore, people have
Mm-hmm.
been quiet about the situation, and it's reaching a point where people are not even afraid of being called a racist or a xenophobe anymore because things have gotten so bad. When you look at places like California where they changed the law because so many people were robbing, and now it's just decriminalized. Just take whatever you like as long as it's under $1,000. And in the UK, we've got essentially whole areas that people won't go to anymore because they have been taken
Mm-hmm.
over by people that come from war-torn countries and still live in that mentality. And there's no integration because there is no multiculturalism. Multiculturalism doesn't work. What's happened is, instead of saying, look, we have a great culture, we're going to let some people in to embrace our culture, what we've done is instead said, well, we don't have a culture. Therefore, it doesn't matter what culture people bring with them. And of course, it does matter because not all cultures are equal. But even saying that, again, that's a racist, xenophobic thing to say. It's ridiculous. I happen to think that our culture is superior because it's based on Christian values. And I think Christian values are rooted in the truth because we believe the truth to be a person in Jesus Christ. We recognize him, we know him, we love him. But if you don't believe that, then all ideas and all cultures are equal because it's just abstract. It means nothing. And I would say even from a secular perspective, you can prove that to be wrong. Go to a country in the Middle East where if you're homophobic, they can push you off a roof. And it means nothing to them because, well, being homophobic is wicked. We'd say yes, homosexuality is wicked. The act is a sin, but we absolutely would not condone pushing someone off a roof because we love the sinner and we hate the sin, and that's rooted in our moral code. But unless you have our moral code, so what? So yeah, it comes back to, we have a culture, we should protect that culture, whether we see that as broadly as Western culture or Christendom itself, or even go back down to the national level and say protecting British culture, protecting Mississippi culture on a state level, and that should be a good thing. And if we then we can have a separate conversation about borders and say, well, we do want to help refugees. Of course we do. It's a Christian thing to help the sojourner, but the sojourner is the traveler. The sojourner isn't the permanent resident, right? So it's about bringing people in, giving them support, and then sending them back on their way to fix their country, right? And nations and tribes are God ordained. Borders are a God given thing for a reason. To get rid of borders is to rebuild the Tower of Babel, and we know where that leads. So that's something
Right.
to be avoided too. All of this is rooted in scriptural lessons that people want to ignore, and when we ignore the scriptures, we end up in a mess.
Amen to that. God, yeah, there are so many things you said that I would like to reply to directly, but we have limited time. Something I want to ask specifically. So it sounds like you're looking at it from a more practical, verifiable analysis of what is happening and the implications, which is fine and good, and that's obvious. There's obviously a huge importance to that. But I like to I like to personally, you could call it diving a little more into the conspiratorial aspect of things, and I like to look at potential motivations and really try to understand the machinations that are happening beneath the surface. So when I look at what's happening in Europe and the U.S., and I look at people like Klaus Schwab and his henchmen throughout the world, Justin Trudeau and Marie Le Pen and many many others, uh, I see a cabal of people who believe that they are the chosen to reinvent the world in their image. I trace their roots back to Nazism, which had an incredibly strong Gnostic flavoring to it in a lot of the things that they believed and their ideologies, philosophical roots throughout history. And I see a grand conspiracy by the enemy. And Klaus Schwab and his henchmen are really just meat puppets of the grand enemy. And so, would you agree with that, or would you amend that in any way? What do you think of that?
Yeah, all of this is the enemy's work, right? So the enemy has lots of tools in his arsenal. One of them is liberalism, which we started the conversation with. Another one is Islam, which has been taking over the West, and the other is, well, politics, really, and people like Klaus Schwab and George Soros that groom politicians and put people in key positions in order to disrupt our way of life. And all of it is about attacking God. And to do that, they do different things. They attack the family, they attack Christendom, they attack Christian values, whatever way they can to destroy our way of life and to kind of raise the middle finger up at God. That's what it's all about.
Amen. I 100% agree with that. And I think one of the things that frustrates me is when you tell that to people who don't have any kind of Christian worldview, and even a disturbing number of Christians you tell that to, and they say, "Oh, that's a conspiracy. You're crazy. There are just evil people in the world." And what's even more distressing is so many people, including some Christians, don't even believe evil people exist. And that's a doctrine issue. Obviously, how can you be a Christian and not believe that evil people exist? It's an absurd conversation every time I have it.
Well, what I suppose you've got to work backwards, right? So you can't work from the top and say, there's an evil conspiracy to affront God. You've got to work on a level that people can understand. So if you can say, well, look at the mass immigration from non-Christian countries into Western countries, where we have Mohammedans outbreeding us quite literally at the same time as national birth rates dropping, eventually, logically, that means that the West will become Islamic. Does that concern you? And if so, what can we do about it? Just work on a level that people are, or if you want to address it from the Schwabian direction, from the WF perspective, that net zero and all of these climate crisis agenda policies are affecting poorer people the most, and taxes are going up. People are paying for ridiculous ideas such as wind farms and solar panels that are making rich people richer, and it's harming everyone. Gas bills are going up, and we've got Western countries banning gas boilers and diesel cars and making all kinds of authoritarian approaches to supposedly change the climate at a level that isn't actually effective. And talk about the 0.4% of carbon emissions, or talk about how carbon is a good thing, and actually without carbon dioxide there would be no human life, and talk about the temperature rises over hundreds of years rather than just over recent years, and how this is just a cycle that the world takes. Break it down to a level that people can relate to, and then eventually get to the idea that, well, evil is pervasive, and there is a war going on a spiritual level, and this is what we're all engaging in. It's not a cultural war, it's not a political war, it is a spiritual war.
Right. The different prefixes to the word war are really just the tiers that the war is taking place on. And the culture war is one tier, and the political war is probably an adjacent tier, and then the war for our heritage and culture, that's a tier above that, and then at the top of it all, the top of the tree of the root of the cause of the whole thing is the spiritual battle. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.